Hey there. So what we're going to talk about in this video, a 5-minute video, is really how you're going to get this done. And remember, this corresponds with chapter 9 in your strategy book, if you're following along in that book. And we've gone through a really long process of putting all of this together, but of course nothing works unless it's implemented. And so this video is about implementation and how we put this thing together. And so for the step one, the difficulty of implementation. Clearly, implementation, if it were easy, you could just say, go do it, and it happens. But organizations are big, and they're clunky, and there are a lot of people, and a lot of opinions, and so you got to kind of figure this thing out. So here are the three main reasons why it's difficult to implement a marketing strategy. And number one is interdependency. You've got to make sure that everybody in the company not only knows what needs to be done, but is willing to do it. And there are steps involved. This is a relatively iterative process. You can't say we're going to go one direction and one area doesn't. Okay, so you're interdependent. This is logistics and accounting and operations and merchandising and the whole thing. Everybody's interdependent, and so everybody has to be on the same page. Evolution. Companies tend to evolve, businesses tend to evolve. Everything needs to move in the right, think about if you were in the glass industry 50 years ago, you were riding on top of the world. Think if you're in the glass industry now, you hope that wine sticks around because that's all that's left, right? So think about it in that manner. Things tend to evolve. And then of course separation, not only is it interdependent, but then each area has to be run properly, and each area has certain aspects of their business that they have to be expert level proficiency in, and so of course they have to be run that way. And you can't have somebody running one area and think they can run the other area. So by necessity, each business has to have a group head who understands the overall process and how that business fits in. So most companies have an intended plan, and then they have a realized plan, and you hope they come close, but they don't always come close. And so you have an intention, and then you have a realization, and that's really the difficulty of implementation. Let's move over here to the middle, and this is relatively complicated here. These are the 4 approaches to implementation of a marketing plan, and so you have 4 different types of approaches. So if you're trying to change a company, here's what you need to do. 1, you have command. So I've checked these off and I X these off. So these are the pros and the cons all the way down. And so you have 4 different types here. You have command, change, consensus, and culture. The 4 C's of implementation approaches. The first one, command, clearly it reduces uncertainty. You need a good, strong leader, and you might be to the point where the company's almost bankrupt. And so in essence, you don't have a whole lot of time to wait around for people to come to some conclusions. It does divide the firm a little bit. It's relatively demotivating. So you really need to make sure you're doing this in a firm that just needs it. You got to get it done. All right, we don't have time to talk about this. We're almost out of money. The next one is an overall. Let's implement it by overall change. And so you're describing the entire process to the company. This is how we're going to do this all the way across. This is when you see Vision 2020 or Vision 2030 or those kind of things. Okay, so you're considering the how, and here's the long term. It still clings to the power at the top. You still need this kind of an attractive leader who can bring the company forward. Okay, so you need someone that you can follow. Consensus. It's great to have multiple viewpoints. And to the degree that you can, you need to have the multiple viewpoints, but unfortunately, as you can imagine, consensus is slow. Or if you have a really strong, assertive attitude inside the meeting, then you have groupthink, because it's just easier to follow that person than to go against them. And so consensus is good, but it's a little bit slower. And then of course, culture. Culture eliminates barriers. This is the best long-term way to change a company. But it's incredibly time-consuming. This could be a 10-year process. Okay, so you have really quick to really slow, or short-term to long-term, and then you work your way down across, and here are checks and X's as to pros and cons. And then over here, you have controls that you have to put in place in implementation. So you have difficulty over here, you have ways to do it over here, and then you have the formal controls. You have input, process, and output. The easiest way to remember them they're intuitive words, okay? So input, process, and output are also before, during, and after. So these are things you put in place. One, obviously an input control is something that needs to be in place before the plan can even be started. A process control can be something that either monitors progress or can change progress in midstream if something's going wrong. And then of course output control can be a review and then pulling it back in and changing things. Okay, so these are activities, mechanisms, and processes. So we've gone from how to control for the inherent difficulty of implementation, to the approaches of implementation, to the formal controls that you put in place for implementation. Thank you.